Hello and welcome. My name is Peter Bonanno, Director of Program Development for the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, here to give you a walkthrough of the 60-minute keynote version. Note that we typically recommend, if possible, if you have a keynote to give, that you make space for 90 minutes, work with the client to arrange that if possible. We found you can do a lot more in 90 minutes than in 60. If 60 is the option you have available to you, though, this is the presentation for you. We start the program, like many Search Inside Yourself programs, with a dyad. What do you love about your work and what are some of your challenges? And taking a few comments from the audience, connecting where possible their comments to some of the topics in SIY. We then do a short arriving practice, and here you'll see in the notes, as in the version 2.5 teacher guide, there's a suggestion about how to introduce this so that you don't need to use technical terms like mindfulness or meditation. And you can give context as to what's happening here and introduce it as a mindfulness practice, just using the idea of fully arriving in one place, mind and body, perhaps connecting to the fact that many people were very busy, might have been feeling scattered, email, thinking about projects, worrying about a conversation that happened in the past. So kind of welcoming in the energy that's likely in the room as participants are popping in for just an hour in the middle of their days. After that arrival practice, introduction, search inside yourself practice areas, emotional intelligence, and moving in briskly to the case of why we're here. Here we have the VUCA world and some of the statistics. A reminder that these can be customized based on your audience. We talk about autopilot traits, and the Viktor Frankl sentiment, as well as how to get off of autopilot. Reminder that if you have not watched the 90-minute keynote introduction video where I explained more about building tension and storytelling in the beginning with a sort of emotional up and down, I would recommend watching that video. In short, the notes in the slides give a sense of the slides which are at more of an emotional down note, which speak to challenge or difficulty, like we're on autopilot and we have this stress and there are all these possible drawbacks to that. But then we go to the up notes. We know something else is possible and we have these aspirations. So that tension between up and down is very helpful in getting the storytelling going for the program. And the alternation between up and down especially is what builds that sort of engaging dynamic to begin. So you'll see slides that are more of a down note marked in the notes and slides that are more of an up note marked in the notes also. That's really just for the introductory section here as we start building the story. So how to get off autopilot, this is where we wrap up the up notes by saying mindfulness, which we can think of as the movement from autopilot to aware. That's a shortened definition that we work with in the keynote. And this is a great place to reconnect back to any comments that might have come up from the audience about the short arrival practice that we did in the beginning. We then jump right to the concept of self-awareness in order to tie that back to the emotional intelligence areas, saying that that movement from autopilot to the aware is the foundation of self-awareness, which Daniel Goleman said was the root of emotional intelligence. Explain the concept of integrated and dedicated practices. And here we connect the dots back to the arrival practice and say, actually what we did there was a form of dedicated practice, where we took a few moments to fully arrive, to be present, to be aware where we were. Important to note that because we're not going to have a focused attention training practice here. So really the main dedicated practice is actually something they did at the beginning with the arrival practice. We highlight then we can do this kind of a practice in the moment as an integrated practice. And here we introduce the 3 breaths micro practice. After having participants do this practice, we then ask, when might you apply these practices? So we talk about the formal name for that first practice we did, now that we've introduced mindfulness, is it was a mindful breathing practice. And the 3 breaths practice was the integrated version. When or where in your life might be useful? Take some comments from the audience. We then go into talking about the research. Do a very quick summary of recapping where we are in the program, and then connect the dots to moving into empathy. An easy way to make this transition is that many people will say what they love about their work and what is the greatest challenge is working with other people. So how does mindfulness, what does this all have to do with how we work with other people? We talk about the importance of empathy, citing the Google Project Aristotle, noting that the most important thing they found was psychological safety. And indeed, if you look at many of the other dimensions as well, many of the other dimensions they found about what makes for a perfect, for the best team were also related to empathy. We say, why is this so challenging though? If everyone intuitively can probably see why this is true, and of course we all like working on teams where people are empathetic and understanding, well, one of the issues is that these same traits that we see in our own minds also show up when we're in groups. We then make the connection that actually this is very simple to understand how mindfulness supports empathy. If mindfulness is a movement from autopilot to aware, a very short informal working definition for empathy can be awareness of others. We don't explain that a lot. You don't have to explain it a lot, typically we find. Instead, the way we recommend demonstrating this is saying, let's see what this is like firsthand by jumping into a listening exercise. You set up the listening exercise and then say, okay, so this is what we're going to talk about, and one person is going to talk, one person is going to listen, but we will do unmindful listening first and see what that's like. Some people do that. You let that go for 30 seconds. Only one way, only A talks, B listens. You don't then switch and do it again. It's not necessary to make the point. And here we recommend mentioning, okay, so how did that feel? What did you feel in your body? What did you notice? People say, I felt deflated. I felt disengaged. Important to make the point that this was an exaggerated version, but if you think, we're doing this often, right? Often we're not fully present with other people. We're not really aware of other people, even when we're sitting right next to them. And we say, let's practice building on the mindfulness practice with the shift to connection, another integrated practice. Do that for 2 reps, 2 times. And then say, let's now shift to mindful listening. Same topics, but this time really mindful listening. Take some comments from the audience about what you noticed. And then here we give what's called the STAR moment of the program. STAR being an acronym for something they'll always remember. It's a presentation technique of naming one thing of, if you remember just one thing from today, remember this. And what we suggest that is how it felt to connect with others. How did you feel during the mindful listening? And for many people, that will have been a very visceral, very experiential thing for themselves, which they'll remember long after they've forgotten all the statistics and research and brain images. And then make the connection to say, mindfulness helps us move not only from autopilot to aware, but autopilot to aware to connected. We can then recap the practices that we've done. And if there's time, ask for when some of these other practices might be useful, like mindful listening and shift to connection practice. Give a summary of the key points. Reference that people can go to silly.org, which has resources and information about programs. And then we close with a very short practice of mindful breathing. Thank you for your efforts. Best wishes.